Hey, this is the national treasure, Nick Aldis, and you're listening to the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. We are your host. He's a Stallion. I am the Enforcer. And this week, we have a very, very special guest. His name is Mike Hermann. You might know him from RetroSoft Studios and from RetroMania Wrestling, the most highly anticipated professional wrestling game probably in the last 10 years. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I don't know. I got to be able to live up to that introduction.
I like to set the bar high, and then usually what I do for myself is just work my way down. That's what I do.
No, but I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. You guys have been so incredibly fan-friendly, so open with the people, really every single step of the way in terms of RetroMania. I mean, when you guys first posted about it, it was just a couple of bald-headed creative wrestlers, wrestling on a screen, and to see where it's come today is amazing. And you guys have the weekly Q&A on your YouTube and the developer updates, so it really brings the fans into what's going on in the game. And there's not a lot of companies that do that. I mean, if 2K Sports did that, we might have had a different, something a little bit different last year for WWE 2K20. But is that something you've always kind of believed in, is just letting people see what's happening so they understand the hard work that goes into it? It's not just as easy as, 1, 2, 3, and you got a great game on screen.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it. I wanted people to know the challenges we had going through developing the game. And one, for me, it's great getting feedback and get people involved. Because when I first started this, I'm like, does anyone else even want this game being made besides me? Because it started out as a hobby. And, on a little message, Wrestling Legends forums where I was posting stuff, and I had a couple people there who were really into it. And I'm like, it's just a good commercial project to even go after. And I kind of did that along the way. Just I wanted to see who else was going to be interested in this. And it's been great. And it's so motivating because I'd say, the internet, depending on where you are, can be toxic a little bit some places, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a little worrisome just kind of putting yourself out there and saying, you guys are going to see the mistakes we make. You're going to see, how we correct those mistakes. But we've been lucky because I would say 99%. Used to people, you're always going to get the people that come, and that bothers you. But I think I've learned it's given me thicker skin, to just kind of, they're the minority,
Yeah, I mean, you guys posted a video, I think, yesterday of some gameplay, or earlier today of some gameplay footage, and like 40 people were like, I hate the music. It's like, dude, it's not the music in the game. It's clearly not the music in the game. Everybody just relax. Right. I saw that. I was like, meanwhile, I'm watching the game. The game looks, sharper. Of course, it's going to get sharper and it's going to get cleaner. But before we get to where we are now, I assume you've been a wrestling fan forever. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, pretty much. So since I was probably 8, I think I probably started. Like right around, and I'll date myself, so that would be like 83, 84 time frame. Right before the first WrestleMania is when I started watching it. And I was turned on by my neighbor who I slept over his house, and he had it on the next morning. He's like, you ever watch wrestling? I'm like, didn't even know what it was at that point. And then, so I wanted to watch it at home the next weekend, and I didn't know what time it was on. Eventually, I found, I had watched WWF at his house. I found NWA. It was before WCW. It was like Jim Crockett Promotions version of their NWA region in Charlotte. And I was hooked, when I saw that stuff, and I was just like mesmerized. I remember one of the first matches I remember watching completion was they replayed Magnum TA versus Chief Wahoo McDaniel in a cage for the U.S. title. And I just was like, this is awesome. I need to watch this all the time. And then it went from that. Then the UWF, Bill Watts started. That was on at like 11 o'clock on Channel 48 in Philadelphia that I would watch. And like World Class was on really late at nights on some Saturdays. Sneaking up to watch Saturday night's main event because my parents wouldn't let me stay up. And yeah, so I grew up with it. I watched it probably pretty religiously up through college. And then didn't watch it as much, starting working and plus moving to 3 hours a night is a lot, and plus then it was 4 shows, 2 from WCW, 2 from WWE, or it was still WWF at the time. And, but I've recently, the last couple of years, I got back into it. I like Ring of Honor. I like Impact. I like some of the smaller ones. I like kind of the bite size. I love NWA Power. And plus I have to say that now that they're in the game, but I do like what they're doing there even before we had a licensing deal with them. But, I've always followed it. Maybe I didn't watch it as much, but I still follow. And in an internet age, you can get recaps on everything now too, which is kind of nice. So if you miss something, you can get a nice recap of it.
Or it's on demand, or in 30 seconds.
I'm a WWE subscriber too. I'm a network subscriber.
You have to be. I just started watching WCW from the studio show, from the first one they have all the way up. I'm like 4.5 months in. I'm like, what else to do during the quarantine besides work out and watch NWA, right?
Right.
You mentioned there's so much, to get into, but you mentioned NWA Power. I don't want to jump around, but we had actually Nick Aldis on the show right after it was announced that he was going to be really in RetroMania for the 10 pounds of gold. And he was so excited, and it really came through. And I don't know, maybe it's just maybe I never pictured Nick Aldis to be like a huge gamer guy.
Right.
And he was just talking about it, and then they had, you guys introduced the 10 pounds of gold feature to the game, and he is, talking about NWA Power, he's like the champion right now. He to me carries himself like the
real world champion.
Thank you. Right? Yeah, exactly. And he was so he was so proud to be in the game, and I thought it was so cool to have a guy like Nick Aldis, because you were kind of releasing certain wrestlers at a time, and we're still doing that. I'm not going to press you. I know tomorrow, 2 days we'll know the last tag team.
Yep.
I'm not gonna look for that spoiler. I have an idea. I'm not going to say anything though. But you like I said, you guys have really done it the right way and really just tease things and let people, you're saving things. You don't want to give everything all in one shot.
Right.
But originally it was the unofficial sequel to WrestleFest, correct?
Yep.
How did it become the unofficial sequel to the official sequel?
Well, it's funny. It really was triggered. It's kind of like, I don't know if you watched the Dark Side of the Ring.
Sure.
If you saw the Brawl for It All?
Yeah.
When Russo basically did that because he wanted Bradshaw to get his butt kicked, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of not exactly like that, but one guy on YouTube said, like, we posted some video and it's like, this is a hack. This isn't a real sequel. You're stealing code, blah, blah, blah. Totally off the reservation kind of comments. And I'm like, I'll show you. We're going to be the official sequel. So I had already tried to find out, like, I did my research. I knew who owned the property, but it's kind of one of those weird properties where Arc System Works, who we licensed from, owns all the old Technos of Japan properties, like Double Dragon.
I was just going to say Double Dragon.
Yeah.
Double Dragon, yeah.
Yeah, River City Ransom, like Mania, which we also have the IP to use in our game, and a bunch of other games. So they own the whole library, but they can't really do much with the WWF stuff because they don't own the license to the characters. So it's not like, that's why you haven't seen like an arcade 1-up or anything of WrestleFest, and you probably won't. You never say never, but so we found Arc System Works, and they were reasonable to deal with, and it's more of a marketing thing. I'll admit that, like, just to say we're the official sequel, and we're a first-time development studio, so I wanted something to give us kind of more credibility and tell people we're serious about this project. This isn't a money grab. We're passionate about it. We want to kind of that WrestleFest was the last series of wrestling games that Technos developed. And they really were one of the pioneers of it. They started with a game called the Big Pro Wrestling that I think was only out in Japan. And that was, the developers of that were friends with whoever, I forget the gentleman's name who developed pro wrestling for the NES, but they were like colleagues or had worked together. So you'll see like Mania has a lot of the same mechanics as pro wrestling from the NES as well. And then, you got Superstars, and then you got WrestleFest, and there were a couple other ones in between. But then it stopped. You had the LJN Super WrestleMania games on the like Genesis, and I played them and I liked them enough as a kid because it was the best thing available at home. But you always wanted WrestleFest, especially then. You wanted, why isn't WrestleFest on the home console? And it just year and year after year after year, and they never did anything with it. So that was the first game I downloaded on MAME. So you have your souped up Xbox. I discovered MAME, or it was Rain actually was the emulator MAME didn't even support it at the time. This is like 97, 98 time frame. And Rain was another series of emulators. I think it's defunct now. But I got WrestleFest on Rain, and I just played. Then you could be the Legion of Doom if you put a code in. And
I'm over here playing as Demolition today. I didn't put in any cheat codes. I gotta. So the direct sequel, that's interesting with the licensing because they have, you can't make it without Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, and clearly the WWF owns that. So give me a little bit of before we get to the wrestling, your background. You've been developing games for how long? What other games have you worked on?
This is the only one.
This is the only one. No kidding.
Yeah. So my background is software engineering, though. Gotcha. So I co-own another business that we do finance and accounting software implementation. So I've been in. Stuff? Yeah, the fun stuff, right?
Sure.
Stuff that really gets your heart revving, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, it's important to have a passion project, so it's a nice transition.
And actually, I do really like my job. Don't get me wrong. Like I like problem solving, and there's a lot of that in there. So I really do enjoy it, but it's not making a video game. You know what I mean? And that's something I always wanted to do since I was a kid. Even I remember programming fireworks on an Atari 800 computer with a tape drive. And it was just at that time, I was probably 8 years old. All I was doing was I had the program code in my hand and I would type it in. That's all I really did. I called that programming when I was 8. You know what I mean?
Listen, as an 8-year-old, that's more than I could do at 15. So that's a good start.
But I always wanted to do something like that. And then when I was in software engineering, and my final project, I wrote a game for that. So I took a game. Well, I didn't write it from scratch, but I took a game and modified it, added features to it, and stuff like that. So, I definitely wanted to do something eventually, and I decided, back in probably 2017, 18, I would get serious about it and do it commercially, and here we are.
So how did you go from creating a game as a first-time game creator to getting the licensing for NWA, Tommy Dreamer, the BWO, things like that?
So one of the first things, I started out, I got the Road Warriors on my own, where I just scoured the internet and found bookers who had relationships with the Road Warriors. And eventually I got one that put me in touch with them. We negotiated a deal, and we got them in the game. Initially, though, I was going after YouTubers. So that was the first idea, because the idea of actually getting professional wrestlers was kind of intimidating. Some of the guys I grew up watching, and I was like, how would I even go about doing something like this? YouTubers seem much more approachable, and it would be a lot easier to do.
So maybe a couple of years ago, I could have been in this game, is what you're saying? You could have had the tag team of the All Night Long Wrestling podcast?
Yes. Although there might have been a copyright infringement somewhere in there.
Lionel Richie gets us every time.
But eventually, so I got him. But then the best decision I made was I went on LinkedIn, and I searched wrestling games to see who had experience making wrestling games, because I knew I was underqualified to do this project. I knew that going into it. And I wanted to surround myself with people who had more experience than I did making video games. I didn't want this to be just another fan project that would start and fizzle out and never see its way to completion. So I found a gentleman by the name of Mike Archer, who used to work at WWE for I think 13 years. Before that, he worked at Acclaim Entertainment and worked on some of the Legends of Wrestling games in several different capacities. And he's worked on probably, I think, 50 or 60 other titles in his career. And now he's an independent consultant. And so I got him on board after, we had lunch, hit it off, and he decided to come on board and help me through all the other licensing. So he had contacts with Tommy Dreamer. He had contacts with the NWA and Dave Lagana over there. Pretty much almost everybody but the Road Warriors, he had a hand in signing.
I guess the dominoes kind of fall. Once you get the Road Warriors, it's like a huge name. So you're like, the Road Warriors are in the game. Right. It's like, oh, wow, that's awesome. So, and everybody was pretty much on board. Was there anybody that you wanted to reach out to and you were like, man, I'd love to have him in the game? And they were like, no.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple people we couldn't work out money with. They wanted, and whether they were worth it or not, we couldn't afford it. Some cases I thought they were worth it. In other cases, I didn't think they were worth it. So the conversation was a little bit easier. But you get people that kind of see the bigger picture. Hopefully this snowballs into something, and we can turn one game into a new franchise and get to them that way.
Sure. I mean, all great games have a sequel, Right. And also the download, the DLC afterwards. That's huge now. How many times does a WWE game come out with 40 wrestlers, and every 6 weeks or so they drop another 5, and you pay the $1.99 or whatever. So there's a lot of money to be made. And listen, if Nikita Koloff gets it, I don't know why anybody else wouldn't get it. That's kind of
well, he's been awesome. Like
what's working with him like?
I met him once at one of Tommy Dreamer's shows, and he was another guy. Like, I have vivid memories of watching him clothesline David Crockett with a chain during an interview. You know what I mean? Like, I remember watching that as a kid. So
scary human being from then until now. It's crazy.
But meeting him couldn't have been nicer. You know what I mean? And he's been awesome. We announced him a couple of weeks ago. He's interacting with fans on social media, going well above and beyond whatever we had agreed to, involvement in as far as what he was required to do. Like, I didn't have to worry about anything. I didn't have to ask him to do anything else. Like, he got it. You know what I mean? He's on there interacting with fans as they're posting, like, oh, this is awesome. Oh, great to be here. I can't wait to give you a Russian sickle. Like, he's doing stuff like that, and he's just been awesome.
That's awesome, and it's so cool to be able to splice the legends in with, the new guys. I know a lot of the game was focused around Johnny. I'm sorry, whatever you want to call him, Johnny Nitro, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Impact,
Retro,
Johnny Retro. Right, that's what he is now. Did him signing in the WWE kind of throw a monkey wrench into everything? Was it just like, he's in the game, we have the creative license, and now go do what you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, our license wasn't exclusive, so he gave us a heads up that could happen.
Okay.
At the time, and as long as our contract was signed ahead of time, it didn't matter where he went. So, and we don't have the rights to his name in WWE, but we have the rights to Johnny Retro. Sure. So, it's just like him going with Lucha Underground or being in Impact or being in anything else. At the time we signed him, he was not currently under contract.
Right. I think they came out a couple of months later. So now,
yeah, and it's actually a good thing he signed. I think it's more visibility on our game that he's there.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure his Twitter followers went up and all the social media went up and stuff like that. And you guys did a really cool thing. You did Indie Mania. You gave a shot to the independent wrestlers to be in the game through fan voting. That came down to the wire, and it was very competitive is an understatement. You saw a lot of wrestlers out there consistently. I'm talking like 4 or 5 times a day telling you to vote for them. And that's, right. I mean, that's genius marketing because they're getting their name out there, but you're also helping get your game out there. That must have been great feedback for you guys.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I couldn't, the guys we got were awesome. Like you said, they went above and beyond. We thought going in, this would be, I'm not saying it was definitely the primary objective was a marketing tool on our part to get somebody in the game. But we definitely did think they would go for it because we thought it would help them as well, try to get noticed and benefit them as well. So we hope to sign more than the winner. So we're already talking to a couple of them about getting more out. If we're successful enough, I want to get all 32 of the guys that were in the tournament in the game and do it in the game. And I would love to do that and really support. Like I didn't even know all the guys going in to the tournament. I'll tell you, the winner, I didn't even know who it was. Like I'd never heard of Warhorse.
He was the independent wrestling champion, I believe, for a long time. Yeah, I didn't expect him to win. My money was on Retro AG and Matt Cross. Those are my two guys who I'm like, man, I really want to see them in the game. But good for Warhorse. He's got, many more fans out there than I anticipated. So plus he's a really cool looking character. So visually, it's going to be awesome.
That's what I was glad. I'm glad of that. 'Cause that's a big reason I think he had an advantage. His look fits the game perfectly. But yeah, we got so much good feedback from all those guys. And I emailed him afterward just thanking them for being in it. But definitely we're going to try to incorporate more of you guys into the game at some point if we were able to.
Yeah, like I said, DLC. I mean, you could the games. To me, looking at all right, now we get to the fun part, to the actual game itself. You mentioned, after WrestleFest, there was, peaks and valleys. There were some really good games. There were some not. Looking at the game visually, clearly it looks like WrestleFest, but to me, it reminds me of Saturday Night Slam Masters. I don't know if you ever played that I
got it on that arcade behind me.
Oh, Saturday Night Slam Masters was one of my favorite games of all time for the Super Nintendo. It was one of those, to those people who don't know what it is, it was a professional wrestling game without the WWE license. So you had a Gratter, which was Big Van Vader, and you had a lot of the Rey Mysterio and whoever else was in the game, but they looked like their characters, but they didn't have the licensing. And the game played more like an arcade game. Is that fair to say? Less of a simulation, more of an arcade game?
Yeah, it was a little more like a fighting game, too, than a traditional wrestling game, but it definitely had wrestling moves in it as well.
Yeah, it was like a Final Fight meets a regular wrestling game.
Right.
So were you, being, the fan you are, were you kind of able to, since you played them all, like pick and choose? You're like, all right, I love this about this game. I love this about this game. And you just kind of took what you thought worked?
Exactly. Like, I played all those games. That was like my heyday in the arcades, too. When Saturday Night Slam Masters was out, 3 Count Bout by Neo Geo, which didn't play that well, but it looked awesome. And they did the same thing. Like, they had the Great Muta in there, but it wasn't the Great Muta, but it looked like him. He blew mist and all that. But all those 2D wrestling games definitely inspired. When I went back and played them, WrestleFest, I'd never stopped playing. I'll be honest with you. I probably played it at least once a month for the last 20 years.
Really? That is awesome.
I mean, I've been big into MAME. So I built my own MAME cabinet probably 15 years ago. So I've been playing arcade games a lot. So I played that, but yeah, all those games. Saturday Night Slam Master was definitely one of them. And I love those Capcom, that art style too, that Capcom did, with the real muscular tone, the colorful sprites and all that stuff. So definitely heavily influenced by that.
Okay. All right, I'm not crazy. I thought so.
No, absolutely.
And then, clearly after the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, you got into the PlayStation 1, which there were not. I mean, WCW VS The World was a good game. That was really all I could think of for the PlayStation 1 that really stuck out to me. So you got to the Nintendo 64. About 2 weeks ago, the other co-host on the show here, Joe, was over, and we played a 44-minute bout of No Mercy. It was mainly because for the first 30 minutes we couldn't remember how to pin, and neither one of us wanted to look it up. So it was a 44-minute match. It was Jericho and the British Bulldog versus Edge and Christian, and I lost. But that, those games really have a place in people's hearts 22 years later. What is it about those games that you think, really stood the test of time for people?
I think part of it is there's more competition then too. So you had the WWE or WWF, WWE games. You also had the WCW games, and you had some other third parties. Like, you even had Backyard Wrestling was out around then. And, you had the Legends of Wrestling roughly in that time era. That was a little bit later, but, you had more competition and you had more wrestling games. There are other ones too.
Oh, Virtual Pro Wrestling. That was
Virtual Pro Wrestling too. I think that was on the PS1 as well. I think that was it. So
that was a good one.
But yeah, you had just more games and each developer's pushing each other, which is kind of lost. You had some of the Fire Pro Wrestling, and that's been around forever. And they just, they came out with one a couple years ago, but that's not an arcade style of game, and it's not really geared. I don't know if it's an American thing but it's definitely more of a technical simulation type game versus a kind of pick up and play quick kind of game. So I just think it's like the variety that we used to have. And then you have like WrestleMania, the arcade game, which was like the Mortal Kombat style game, which, love it or hate it, but it was different. And it was another option you had.
Yeah, I remember Undertaker throwing souls at people and beating them with tombstones. Like that, you're right. That stuck out to me at that point.
Right. So I think a lot of it is just like and wrestling was big then. And it sucks this thing happened, in the world today, because I think wrestling was really on the big uptick. You got AEW coming around. You got NWA coming back. You got Impact doing well. Ring of Honor doing well. And you get, the indies were getting stronger again. and just like wrestling was getting popular, and they see this big TV deal that NBC signs with WWE, and just wrestling in general seems to be on an uptick that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, it hit the peak, and now although on the flip side, we've been trying to champion this idea too, not to get off topic here, but as far as like being a professional wrestling fan, what a better time to go. There's a million streaming services. There's Power Slam TV. There's the Ring of Honor. There's Demand Progress. Go catch up on, there's so much wrestling. So hopefully the fans take advantage of that and independent wrestlers are not making a ton of money, at this point. So the pro wrestling tees with buying, go buy the shirts and the things like that. Now
here's a little tip for you bringing that up. They are Ryan Barkin from Pro Wrestling Tees making an appearance in the game.
Really? That is awesome. So is there going to be RetroMania merch on Pro Wrestling Tees?
So yeah, we actually have a store right now. Just a couple t-shirts. I think we have the Road Warriors up right now. I think Tommy Dreamer and Monique Dupree from House of Hardcore are on a shirt. And we're going to add everybody on there. And that is a revenue split between the wrestlers get a portion and charity gets a portion. And Pro Wrestling Tees get theirs. But our company's not taking any of the profit from those shirts. So we haven't sold that many yet. But, we're going to get that store up and running by the time it is up now, but we just don't have all the shirts up yet.
That's awesome. So by the time the game we said is going to be coming out in July. We didn't say that. Yep. Do we have a date in July yet? We don't.
Not yet.
Okay.
And, there's a chance we could miss it. I'm going to throw that out there right now. It won't be by much. It's not Duke Nukem Forever. We're still working towards it. We actually hired 2 more artists in the past 2 weeks to try to keep getting to that July date.
Listen, the coronavirus has ruined everything.
I know. But the other thing is, like, the certifications through the publisher, like through Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft are delayed a little bit. So we're kind of up. We're going to be up against that as well. So
if there's ever a time where fans can like kind of get off your back in terms of being late in the game, I think this is the perfect
The worldwide pandemic will do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This will be the one time like, what do you mean it's not out by midnight? So now, like I said, I was playing WrestleFest today, and the moveset limited clearly at that time. Yeah. But WrestleFest had the signature moves of a lot of the guys too. How wide will the moveset be per wrestler? And
just hip tosses and arm drags. That's all we had the budget for.
so just like pro wrestling for Nintendo, right?
Yeah, we have one more move than pro wrestling.
So it's like was a Royal Rumble for Super Nintendo? Everybody had the same moves.
Yeah. I like I said, we took WrestleFest, and the one thing I didn't like about that game is you couldn't really pick what move you were doing. So you were playing earlier today. Like my guy was Jake the Snake. I always played as Jake the Snake. So you started out doing a body slam and a snapmare, and kind of alternated between those two. And eventually you started doing a side suplex. Yep. And eventually you did the DDT, and that was pretty much it. You had some Irish whip moves and things of that nature. So we took that, but we said, all right, let's give 4 weak moves, 4 medium moves, and 4 strong moves, and a finisher. Wow. So those are all, and that's just through the grapple. And then you can do running moves where you're running at your opponent, where your opponent's running at you. Corner moves where you can throw your opponent into the corner and do a corner running move. Corner grapples, you have 3 more of those. You can dive to the outside of the ring. You can fight on the apron, the front apron of the match. You can fight on there. You can fight on the outside of the ring.
Wow. I mean, and as an arcade game, you don't expect the moveset to be that in-depth. So hearing that, like, I was already pumped for the game. Now I'm even more so. That is so cool because, it's on my WrestleFest. Like, I could never figure out how to do. I was Earthquake today. It was a suplex and a side slam, and I'm like, and I was getting so mad. I was like, I don't want to do this, but
that's all there is. I mean,
yeah, it's all he's got. It's so all right, cool. So that's a lot. And now you guys, I saw the developer Q&A. You said you're going to have up to 8 people on screen, but it kind of got a little chaotic. So now you have the option to have however many you want.
Yeah. So I like 8 personally. My kids are play testing, and they're like, it's a little too much. So I just each when you play the Royal Rumble, or I shouldn't say that, strike that, Retro Rumble. I can't say that.
We can edit that out later, just like we edited the other thing. You're fine.
But when you play Retro Rumble, you can pick like how many wrestlers start in the ring, how many wrestlers are max in the ring at once. So you can pick if you only want like 6 only 6 or only even 4. If you don't want to go more than that, if you just don't like it, you can do that. Or just to kind of change the match type by doing that as well.
And the different match types, I know this was, I implore everybody to check out the Q&A that you had up today. You went through all the different match types. The Bad Street is not the Freebirds, right? We want to get that across.
No, so we've gone to a couple independent wrestling shows locally around the Philadelphia area, and whenever we go somewhere, we do kind of a ring. So we put their logo on a ring in the game. So when people are playing it at the show, they see their promotion in the ring. Oh, and then we do a little that little main menu. We put their graphic up on there as well. And they had a show called The Battle for Bad Street.
That's really so. Even like local promotion, getting the local wrestlers in there, man. That's really cool. Now, will there be a demo before the game comes out?
To be determined. So we've gotten some people. We have some people doing closed beta for us now. The only reason I'm hesitant to do a full demo, it's just one more thing I have to manage. And we're already a small team and spread pretty thin. And a demo would take on a life of its own as far as dealing with that. So it's to be determined.
If you need 2 guys to do it on the QT, we're your guys. I got nothing but time. I will gladly play the game for 24 hours straight right now. Now, it's coming out for a bunch of different platforms. Yep. I have already reserved the Switch version because the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox, you said it's going to be 30 days before the date of release, right?
Yeah, they don't let you do pre-orders by yourself, and they won't do pre-orders on their sites until you're 30 days out from launch. So I think we have to at least submit the game to them first. Now, when I say submit, I mean submit the final code. We already got approval. That's been done for months. Like, they already approved our game for their platforms. So when I say submit the game, that's when you submit the final code base, and it has to go through Sony and Microsoft's QA and all that. But until you do that, you can't get a pre-order on one of their stores. And the same goes for Nintendo as well. Nintendo, though, will let you do your own pre-orders.
Okay, yeah, they're more like independent friendly, right. It seems like Nintendo is. Are there going to be any major differences between the Switch version to the Xbox and the PlayStation 4?
No, none at all.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. And being able to take it on the go, I feel like, mobile gaming, like the Nintendo Switch and the DS Lite and all that stuff, there hasn't been a good mobile game. And since, for me, it was Game Boy Advance Fire Pro. That was the last one I played that I still play to this day. I mean, the game is so deep and it's so in-depth. And I'm like, when I travel, I still bring my Game Boy Advance. It's like this big, and I bring my Switch and my Game Boy. So I'll go from Resident Evil on the Switch to wrestling on the Fire Pro.
Oh, not even an SP. You still got the big one, huh?
Oh yeah, it's what I had. I found Fire Pro and I lost it, and I had to rebuy it again. But to be able to have a good mobile game, I think that's so cool. And the Switch is such a great platform because, listen, RetroMania is not going to be in 4K, right? So you're not going to lose anything from playing it on the Switch. And if it's going to play the same, I think it's such a niche market, if you will, for a mobile game and being able to play online mobile. That's going to be a whole new level of gaming. I feel like it's going to be open up for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we may release the remake version of RetroMania at the same time, since everybody seems to be doing remakes now. So we'll have a high-def remake released at the same time as the original.
I literally just played through Resident Evil 2 and 3, the remakes of the original, so I fall victim to that marketing scheme. No,
I'm with you. I just thought somebody said that's kind of my standard answer when somebody says, why isn't it in HD or something? I go, well, that's for the remake that we're going to be doing,
Yeah, the 6-month anniversary when you re-release it, new packaging, comes with a free head. Listen, a free RetroMania headband. I'm sold. Right. I'm easy. I got it for my Dusty Road shirt on. I'm a mark for all of this. I'll wear anything. Is there anything that you wore, like you went in, you said, man, I really want this in the game, and as it just didn't turn out your way, or there's something you missed that you might want to add DLC later on?
Yeah, so so for DLC, I want to clarify one thing. We're going to do a combination of free and paid. So like game modes, I think, and arenas and stuff like that will be free DLC. We're not going to charge for stuff like that. The only way we'll charge for DLC is if it's like new licensed wrestlers that, it'll be some we'll have to make a little money in order to pay the license, something like that. Unless we're gangbusters, then maybe who knows? Maybe it'll be free DLC. Who knows? But as far as that, the one thing I want to add at some point, hopefully, is like a double cage match. But it's tough.
Bunkhouse Stampede style,
like War Games, right?
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Although I can't call it that, and I'm aware of that. Another edit out, but that's trademarked. But anyway, a double cage match around 2 rings. Just because I think it would be really cool. The problem we actually have artwork for it already. The problem we have is how to handle the camera. And if I'm in one cage on the left and I have local co-op going and someone else is on the right, you got to zoom way far out.
Super widescreen, right?
Yeah, and it may be just too far. It was kind of too far out almost. So we're still playing around with how we can do something like that. And maybe once we now online won't be at launch. It's just super buggy right now, but it's definitely something we're working on. So maybe that would probably work in an online mode where everyone would have their own camera kind of following them. And you could maybe do something like that there. So, but that's one thing I would really like to do. And something actually came up the other day is doing that WCW 3-tiered cage.
The Tower of Doom. I think it was called the Tower of Doom, right?
Yeah. Something like that. Is that the one
David Arquette won the title on?
I don't know if he won it. Did he win it there? I don't think he won it in that match. Maybe, though.
I would have to defer to Joe, who I have since nicknamed WrestlePedia. Joe, did David Arquette win the title in the Tower of Doom cage?
He's looking it up.
Dude, are you Wikipediaing? Probably not. That's okay. I
think it was a heel turn by DDP or something at the top of the cage. He handed the belt
there you
or something
go.
like that. Yeah, something along those lines.
That's my guy. Whenever it's like 1 a.m. and I'm like, man, who is the 3rd Intercontinental Champion? That's Joe. That's what he brings to the table. But I have like a million questions about the gameplay and all this stuff that I don't want to know the answer to because I want to be surprised when the game drops. I don't want to know I want to know everything, but I don't want to know everything. Right. So I am. I can't tell you how excited we are for this game. I've been following it, and like I said, your ability to just show the fans what's going on week to week to week. I think it's so cool. Make sure you're following RetroMania and RetroSoft on YouTube. You guys post some great stuff on Twitter too. I think it was you guys that posted Vader killing Cactus Jack with the powerbomb on the outside.
Yeah.
I had just listened to the Tony Schiavone podcast when he talked about that thump, and I was like, man, I can't find it. And the next day I was like, holy shit, there it is. So that was,
I can't take credit for all that. A guy I hired, Mike T. So a real quick story on him. I found him on LinkedIn too, and we had a meeting set up for a Monday or on a Friday, and he's like, can we postpone till Monday? I'm like, here we go. This guy's kind of a flake or whatever, right? Yeah. And he's like, I just bought a WWF Superstars arcade cabinet. It's sitting in my living room. If I don't move it tonight, my wife's going to kill me.
He's one of us.
I'm like, yeah, no problem, and you're hired. Like, I didn't need to hear anymore. Yeah, I mean, if that's not the best pitch line to become a retro game creator, I don't know what is. That's yeah.
Well, you guys, like I said, you have such a cool Twitter following, and there's so much that we don't know. So today we're recording this. It's May 13th. I believe you said Friday the last tag team will be announced. Correct?
Correct.
No hints, right? We're not going to get any hints. We're not going to get anything out of you. I don't want to. All right, I'm not gonna.
Maybe when we're off record, off the record, I'll give you something.
Perfect. That, you know what? Deal. All right. Well, we are looking forward to it. Everybody, make sure RetroMania is the game. Pre-orders are available now for the Nintendo Switch. If you're looking for a cool game to play on the fly, take the pre-order for the Switch. If you want to play on the Xbox and all that, just give us 30 days before the release of the game. The more people play this game, the more people buy this game, the more likely it is there's going to be more content for you guys, for the fans, more wrestlers and sequels and stuff like that. And in a world where, let me get your take on this. And I'm not trying to talk bad about anybody, but obviously, clearly, when WWE 2K20, the last one came out, 21-20, it was universally hated more than Waterworld was when Waterworld was released. The reason why is because of all the bugs in the game. And some of, inexcusable, I think a lot of people had said, being somebody who's testing games like that, how is that just a company looking to get the game out as quickly as possible by the deadline to make the money, or what goes into that?
So, I don't have any of the issues they have. They have stockholders. They're a big corporation, right?
Sure.
So they have to get that game out. I can tell you, I would be shocked if any developer on that team said it's ready to go. So it's definitely not the development team, I would say. And honestly, I have no inside track. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty positive that nobody on that development team said, yeah, it's ready. Ship it out,
It's 2K. 2K's been around for how long? They've made some of the greatest NFL games, NBA games. It's not like they're a fly-by-night organization either.
Yeah, it was a bad situation. I think Ukes had left earlier in the year, and they had a souring with them. So they lost all that, and they took it into a new direction. And, it was doomed to fail when they made the decision to move forward with it, I think, at that point. It's hard to just pick up. And wrestling games are hard to make. There's a reason there aren't a lot of them out there. They're difficult to make. Like, there's been a lot of colossal. Like, the TNA game wasn't that good.
I forgot.
That EA had the WCW license and put out a terrible game. This is years ago. So
Mayhem,
it's not just the money. Like, you can have a lot of money, and it's not like you can just throw money at it to make a good wrestling game. You can make stuff look pretty. Like, the models look great, but not when their arms are bending and, you have all those other
spaghetti and all that stuff.
So it takes a lot to make a good wrestling game and to make it play well. You can make things look good, but can you make them play well? So that's when you'll see other wrestling games kind of crop up. Until you see actual gameplay, have cautious, skepticism as far as what they're going to produce.
Yeah, and it's like, I'll go back to Fire Pro. Fire Pro is not the most visually appealing game, but as far as like gameplay and simulation, it's unmatched almost. And I think to capitalize on, to not focus so much on the graphics. Like when I play Madden 20, it's like I'm watching a football game, and that's cool and it looks great. But if the gameplay isn't there, I will watch a football game, and then I'll put on I'll play probably, like you said, Duke Nukem 3D, or I'll play Streets of Rage 3 or something like that. Something that looks good, but it plays great. And I think based upon the gameplay, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, but I think that's what we're going to have with RetroMania. We're 2 months out, hopefully, maybe 3 months. Who knows? Coronavirus is real, man. It's nobody's fault if the game gets delayed, but we're
still pushing to July, though. We're still pushing for July.
31 days in July. We got plenty of time.
Yep.
We're not locked down to a date. But everybody, be sure to follow. And what's the Twitter for RetroMania? Is it
at RetroSoft Studio.
At RetroSoft Studio. Be sure to follow on Friday when the new tag team is announced, and the developer on YouTube and stuff like that. Really looking forward to it. We're a couple months out. We wish you guys nothing but the best of luck, and thank you so much for your time joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That was Mike Hermann,